start, because we don't have much time. Okay, so now we're moving to the next Romanian perspective, and the University of Bucharest. Follows you.
Good morning, my name is Oana. This is Roxana. Today we are going to present our national board. First, a little bit about Romania. After a period of economic growth, the country has suffered badly as a result of the economic and the financial crisis. Our official recession period was between the first quarter of 2009 and 2011. However, up until this moment, the economic growth is still virtually in existence, coupled with high unemployment rates. Our country was part of the IMF-led our bailout, and we received funding in 2009. Also, as our colleagues from were already told you, the economic situation was translated at a political level into governmental instability and some civil unrest at the beginning of 2012. We will first talk about a little bit of the governmental reforms. I would like just to stress a few of the most important laws given in the period by our government. For example, in 2009, we have laws about the rectification of the budget, the law about the salaries of the public sector, which were downgraded by 25%. Also, there were, the following year, there were some measures taken in order to reestablish the budgetary balance, and some more financial and fiscal measures. Two programs are quite interesting in this period. The first one is the First House. It's a program that helps young people to get to own their first house. The condition in order to enter in this program is to be up until, I think, 35 of age, and not to have previously owned a house. You get help, state support in the sense of low taxes for your loan, and also you can pay that house in 25 years. During the last year, the Entrepreneur Woman program was created, which will be implemented this year. It tries to support the integration of women into the work labor market. In what concerns the EU reforms, the main purpose of the financial and economic policies of the EU was to support the single market in this difficult period. And it had two main programs in order to reach this goal. The first one was the Economic Recovery Plan, which sought to increase investments in infrastructure and key sectors such as cars, for example, constructions or green technologies. Also tried to mobilize funds for improving the labor market. Not at least tried to coordinate the national budgetary systems, so wouldn't be a very high gap between different member states. After that, the temporary framework for state aid measures was adopted in 2009, which offers access to financing for companies, especially low interest loans with a state guaranteed maximum sum, and also encourages investment in sustainable solutions. The main policies that directly affected Romania regard the state aid to the agriculture domain, the subsidized loan schemes for the car industry. We have a program called Pravla, in which you can give a car older than 10 years old, and you will receive something like 1,000 euros in order to buy a new car. Also, there were some antitrust enforcements in the energy sector because we had some problems at this level. Between starting July 2009, an excessive deficit procedure against Romania was started by the European Council, which means that Romania exceeded the 5% deficit that the European Union considers as high as possible. But this procedure is in the process of being revoked starting from April. Romania, as I previously said, Romania benefited from a balance of payment assistance program, which was supported in part by the European Commission and in part by the International Monetary Fund. Between 2009 and 2011, we were assigned an overall amount of 20 billion euros, with repayments starting in 2015. Between May 2009 and June 2011, Romania received 12.6 billion euros, but did not further engage in a second fund of 3.6 billion due to good performances. These good performances have to be taken into account that the standards were at the floating line. So we cannot speak of an actually important growth in the economy during that period. Also, between 2011 and 2013, there were a second precautionary assistance program, which implied actually a sum of 4.9 billion euros to be at the disposal of Romania in case the country needed further sums. At the EU level, the trend of taxation is, on one hand, increasing tax revenues by increasing the personal income tax, the social security contribution, the VAT tax. In Romania, for example, it was increased up until 24%, and also excise duties on alcohol and tobacco. At the same time, other taxes were reduced in some countries, like tax on labor, headline tax, and corporate tax relief on investment and in physical capital. These were slight reforms in the system, but the European tax system structure still remains entrenched with a clear difference between both tax level and tax composition across the EU. For example, for the EU 15, the Eurozone, they raise largely the same amount, while for the new member states which are not yet in the area, there are fewer taxes, but with high consumption taxes and usually a flat rate system. This is a table comparing the taxation measurement taken by different member states. Also, EU stressed the importance of an employment strategy within this period. now the 2020 employment strategy is in place, which targets 17% employment rate by 2020. Also, in 2012, a new youth employment package was adopted, which tries to implement policies regarding the inclusion of the youth in the labor market, due to the fact that youth unemployment rates are actually higher across the European Union than unemployment rates taken at the general population level. Now I will give the floor to my colleague for the local and regional reforms.
Okay, since I'm so passionate about local and regional reforms, I will try to be brief and to partially explain what's the situation in Romania at this level. Generally, we have to consider that Romania is divided in counties. The divisions are provided for you here. The capital is marked on the map. The decentralization process that was actually initiated as early as 2002 had mixed repercussions and largely negative consequences, in the sense that even though it externalized the main public services towards the local communities, it did not regulate the local budgets accordingly. As a matter of fact, impoverished, dealing with a great number of prerogatives and attributions at the local level, the regional and municipal authorities were facing increased debt for responding to the community's needs. Therefore, on the background of decentralization, the fact that even though the local communities had to provide for their citizens healthcare services, educational services, social services, infrastructural development, and so on, they were significantly pressured by finances. And this led to an impoverishment of the local community. It followed the moment 2008 when the main consequences of the European crisis marked even the local level. And this first repercussions resulted in initially great debt of the local communities towards the state budget and towards private credit. The picture is therefore great for the entire local system in Romania, but we've actually decided to choose a successful case in order to show that solutions to crises are mainly reachable path. Therefore, in order to discuss the case study, we've selected Sibiu. Sibiu is, I think you've seen on the map, it's in Transylvania. It's close to our college choosing. It's a central city. This is the county of Sibiu. Sibiu, the city, is the capital of the county. This is the main square. Okay, why is Sibiu a successful case? First of all, the major impact to the city is provided by the state, by the fact that the city enjoyed the status of European capital city, European cultural city in 2007. The local authorities were smart enough to capitalize, to heavily capitalize on this status, and it manages, when the economic crisis unfolded, it manages to somehow deal with the shortages provided by prices. Moreover, as observers from Romania and specialists in local administration observe, Sibiu is actually enjoying a semi-autonomous status, semi-sovereign or urban regime, in the sense that it is one of the cities that actually gather to the local budget something above 50% from taxes, from local taxes, without the excessive need of help from the state budget. As a matter of fact, Sibiu presently collects 66.66% of the total of the local budget from local taxes. What were the main strategies? Mainly, it was about the implementation, the successful implementation of public-private partnerships with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, a project that started in 2000, as early as 2003, and it continues presently in order to reconstruct, rehabilitate the streets in the city, and to provide jobs, since the construction, as our colleagues from Greece pointed out, it's a problematic sector following 2008. So, hence, from 2008 till now, 60 streets were rehabilitated through a program partly financed by the local municipality, partly financed by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, for bridges. Moreover, it is important to stress the fact that Sibiu managed to boost and to profit from the traditional foreign networks, especially with Germany, since Sibiu incorporates a significant, let's say, German heritage. Actually, the mayor in Sibiu belonged recently to the civic German forum, a local party in the region. Therefore, they profited from the networks with Germany, and hence with a grant offered by the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, and with a private company in Germany, BMP, and GIZ, it manages to, starting from 2003, it manages to start and finish the reconstruction of the old city center. It's beautiful, you should visit it. Presently, it's really enjoyable. Cultural tourism is particularly important for Sibiu. It's actually one of the main investment focus. In the report, we presented the case more thoroughly, but it's suffice to say that if in 2002 the money spent averagely by a tourist in Sibiu was only of 15 euros, today it's 120 euros per day. So a tourist is spending in Sibiu 120 euros per day. Almost also the night spent in Sibiu increased. The community manages to increase the time spent by a group or by a person in Sibiu. It also again benefited from the local the traditional ties with Germany. A significant proportion of the tourists are coming from Germany, except from the autochthonous ones. Okay. Finally, some measures were taken in the sphere of taxation. Since citizens were actually enjoying their community, this boosted the local the trust in local authorities, and this led in turn to an effective actual tax collection. As I pointed out, the municipality benefits from 66% of autonomously collected taxes. Moreover, since Ms. Herta from Cruz presented the case during this day of the civil society, Sibiu is paradigmatic in this sense because it's the local community is particularly concerned with the collaboration with the organization of the civil society and NGOs. And the Fundația pentru Rehabilitare Urbană, the Foundation for Urban Rehabilitation, was involved in the rehabilitation of the city, mainly by expertise. Also, it is also involved in some important events, such as the international. Maybe you heard it was like particularly popular during this month of the International Theatre Festival in Sibiu, gathering artists from all over the world. It is important to mention that if initially the festival was almost exclusively budgeted, financed from the local budget, something like 96%. Today, after 20 years of doing the festival, it enjoys the support of private companies abroad, especially in Germany and Austria, but also in companies from Romania. There are a lot to say about Sibiu. It's important to mention also the municipal action program that is developing presently. It started in 2012 and is developed from 2020 until 2020. It is an initiative again aimed at boosting cultural tourism, which is a strategy for the city. It aims also at the reconstruction of educational establishments. Its focus is actually on the educational establishments. The city owns, Romanian, Hungarian, and so on. But it's also important to stress the fact that it's a particularity among the Romanian cities. Well, we are heading to conclusions. Okay.
In what regards the economic policies, the taxation measures were focused on increasing the government revenue, increasing the prices of goods and services, but also brought a high cost of doing service. The reduction of wages and social services was translated into a reduction of purchasing power. Also, in the case of Romania, there's a very strong process of brain drain, in the sense that our skilled young leave the country and migrate for Western Europe or even outside the continent. So, in our case, this is also a big problem because, for example, in the case of medical students, the country invests in them and the state doesn't benefit, and the society as such doesn't benefit from their expertise. The effects of the crisis, there were some slightly positive effects in the sense that the fiscal injection helped Romania and its economy to overcome the financial crisis. And the state aid control has helped in reducing the excessive deficit among member states, but also brought very negative effects: high cost of living, low social services, and exposed weak institutional structures of the state. Our government responded to the crisis through policies which mainly regarded raising money from the domestic economy to avoid external debt. Also, there was a reduction of government support to social services such as health, pension, and social infrastructures. In the case of health, those kind of measures had strong negative effects. Our public service, almost health service, almost facing bankruptcy. In the public sector salary, the salaries were reduced 25%, as I previously said, which also lowered much further the spending power of the population. Taken as a whole, the system of regulation of the public wage system was quite ineffective. There were some mistakes and successes of the central and the local authorities. The successes were mainly at the local level, in which, as presented in the case of Sibiu, some local initiatives managed to bring local funds and increase the local economy. Also, there were some development initiatives which were rather successful. The mistakes, mostly at the national level, regarded the reduction of the salaries, the cut down of social benefits, effective especially the aged. In the case of Romania, the percentage is very high, so it was a snowball effect in the end at the level of the entire society. And also the low absorption of the EU funds was a result of the weak institutional power and organization in order to manage to absorb those funds. So, in conclusion, our Romanian policies had diverse effect on the economy and the lives in our country. Thank you very much.
We look forward for your questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, so no questions are allowed. And please, because there are another 3 presentations. So now the Czech team is supposed to present another one.
Good morning. I would first like to introduce ourselves. I'm Mila and this is my colleague Lucia, and we are from Czech Republic, from Slovakia University and we want to present in the face of Czech Republic. First, I will talk about the national level and the most important reforms at the national level, and then Lucia will talk about regional level. So at the national level and all, in Czech Republic is applied the neoliberal approach. That means that the state and government really want to save money. They want to cut the budgetary expenses and increase the incomes. Here on the picture you can see our now former Minister of Finance. His name is Miroslav Kalousek, and he was appreciated by the economists in 2012 as the best Minister of Finance in Central and Eastern European region. So it is like, for us it's biased because a lot of Czech economists are criticizing him for this policy and this approach. First of all, there were some reforms of taxation. The taxation gets always higher, about 1% or so, and it was presented that it would really higher the incomes and we would have more money to spend on welfare system, on education and so on. But the balance was like, yes, the incomes increased, but only slightly, about almost 1 billion Czech crowns, which is not that much. And it was expected from this minister that the increase of VAT would bring like 14 billion crowns. You know, so it was like bad. It was like a not so good measure, and he was completely out of the form. Then there was an attempt of reform of social welfare system. The reform was implemented at the beginning of 2012, and the main feature of the reform is the so-called S-card. It should be like your ID when you are applying for social welfare support, and it should really make the whole process more easier and more effective, and it should decrease some spendings on bureaucracy. It should also be a punishment for people who misused the social welfare support in the past, because for the S-card it was also like a credit card, and you gain the amount of money for the social welfare support, but you couldn't spend the money for everything wanted. There were some, the spendings were allowed only for some goods. Like you couldn't buy, for example, cigarettes, alcohol, and so on. So in some way, this should be such a punishment. Actually, then the reform was about greater involvement of labor agencies, which should support people which are searching for jobs, and there was like a greater support for retraining, because there are some sectors in Czech Republic like industry or IT, for example, where there is a lack of labor force, and otherwise in the sector of services the people cannot find the job. So it was aimed also for retraining. But actually, when this was implemented, the whole system crashed down suddenly. The people didn't get their social welfare support for almost 3 months because the system was not working. And there were like a big protest, and actually now is in the House of Commons of Czech Republic a new reform of social welfare system, which should end the S-cards and hold this system. So it was not very successful measure, you know. Then we had a reform of the pension system. The reform is still not complete. And in January 2013, the first taken measures were implemented. Among them was introduced the so-called second pillar of pension system. Until now, until January 2013, we have in Czech Republic just the pay-as-you-go system. That means that the people were not saving money for their own pension, and they were becoming everything from the state. But it was much greater pressure for the state and for the state budget, because the whole population gets older. So in the second pillar you could save for your own pension. The second pillar now is optional. You can volunteer, and the state will give you some money like a reward that you are saving for your own pension. And you know, it was not so successful, because from January 2013 till now, which the pillar should be closed for the people above 35 years old, they cannot no more enter the pillar in such a good under such a good conditions. They will not get the contribution for the state. But there was no much interest for this pillar. Only 32,000 people entered the pillar, which is like nothing almost. So the main problem by this reform is that the state didn't communicate very well to the people, and a lot of people actually doesn't know or didn't know that they had this opportunity to enter the second pillar and get some contributions from the state. Then another reform was reform of the education system. The main aim of the reform was introduce the tuition fees for universities, but there were such a big protests. In the picture you can see one of them. They are in the masks of our former Minister of Education, and they were like throwing melons to the students. Like, you know, it should symbolize, we don't care about you. You just have to pay because the state has no money. And it was really the way the state communicated with the students. There were no negotiations, anything. But the protests were so strong that the state dropped out of this reform and now is preparing another one maybe to be implemented. So all the effort in this area focused only on competitiveness on the market, which were not like there were not any great measures who would be actually changing something. Then we had the reform of the public administration. There's a long-term project called e-government, which means that you wouldn't have to go to some institution for a wide range of purposes. You just do everything online. And it should also reduce the bureaucratic apparatus of the state, and the state should save money for that. There are also in 2011 introduced so-called basic registers, which should standardize the work, the agendas and the processes made on the institution on every level, like on national level, regional and also local level. And there should be some standards for who is responsible for what and what amount of money will they get for some things they do. But in 2011 they started the preparations for this reform, for mapping the agendas and processes made in this institution. But it didn't work very well. So they stopped. In 2012 there was a reform of the whole process, and till January 2013 it began again. So now it is in the phase of just mapping the agendas and the processes in these institutions. There were also some other measures taken. There was introduced Act number 326 on promotion of the economic growth and social stability. Our president vetoed this bill because he thought it is unconstitutional, because there were some really big cuttings of social welfare support and so on. And there was also, but the government pushed it through. They overvoted the veto of the president. But after that, the opposition called for the non-confidence vote, and the government failed in this vote, and the new established government never implemented this bill. Then there are some measures against corruption. These are very popular in Czech Republic. All the politicians are talking about it, and they are quite successful. If you consider we have now 2 members of the parliament who are actually in jail, then for others who are waiting for the trial, and even the assistant of the prime minister is also accused of corruption and of misusing her competences. So this is that. The measures in fighting corruption were almost all about giving more independence to the police and to the special forces, which should concentrate themselves on the cases of corruption. And it was quite successful. But the problem with these measures is that fighting corruption is like ad hoc. There is no implemented strategy, and it's partly in a legal vacuum. So there was established an NGO which is called Reconstruction of the State. The symbol of this NGO you can see here, and they are proposing 8 bills which should aim on fighting corruption. And they are looking for support in the parliament. Until now, they have promises from 40 our government fell down, and almost all these politicians are from the parties which actually don't have to get elected the next time, so they will have to probably start once again with the whole work. There were also some investment incentives, but it was not a great deal. The state really didn't want to spend any money, and that's why our economic policy is often criticized. Like that we are saving money too much, that actually it is not healthy for the economic growth. Like the economists are saying that we are not the country who will be, or which will be among the countries that are most affected of the crisis, and that we have not so high public debt, so that we actually do not have to save money so hard, and that we should probably invest much more, and it would be much healthier for the GDP growth and for the economy of the country. And now I will give the floor to Lucia.
Thank you. Now I will speak about the local level. I came from the South Bohemia region, so I chose this example. And some basic information about South Bohemia. The rate of unemployment is 70% now, but compared to the national rate of unemployment, that is 8.4, it's quite good score for this region. So there might be only some slight local reforms, but on the national level, as it hasn't been said, it was governed by the central or central-right parties, but the regional level is ruled by the social democratic parties and some coalitions partners. Well, the regional level in the Czech Republic doesn't have so many competences to move and to reform the system so much, and it wouldn't be also that much effective to do this. The South Bohemia region didn't issue any law that would make some reforms to the system according to coping with the crisis, but it issued only some law about environment and so on. Also, the taxation is not the competence of the local level, but the taxation given by the national level has big influence on the regional level. Because of the coping with the crisis, the government, the national government, gives some money to the regions, so that also some financial restrictions going from the government level to the local level affects also the South Bohemia region. There is also a kind of influence of the European Union. It's more or less only about the structural funds, and the local level is competitive with these troubles, because as it has been said, there is really big corruption on the local level, and also the structural funds are really in some troubles with corruption, and it's not effectively used. Well, and some savings that are after the year 2008. As I have said, the budget is decreasing, and the local level has to make some savings in ordinary payments, and also in some strategical decision making. And the strategy development is very important, and we can see how the local level wants to deal with the crisis, and where are the preferences, where to spend money and where to save money. Of course, you have to keep in mind that there are some mandatory expenses. And I've chosen 4 strategical investments. The they decided not to invest to the rural area that much. But the other three examples, such as economic development, infrastructure, and tourism, the money for these departments were decreasing a lot. As you can see, the tourism that is very important for this area is not supported anymore as much as it used to be. And this is the crazy table of the final account of the Bohemia region. We can see that it's going into really way down these days. So the aim of the council on the local level should deal at first with its own problems and to consolidate the final account and not to go into such debt and to have some good strategy that should coordinate expenses given to some priorities. Okay, and now I would like to sum it up. The national level that doesn't have that many competencies where to spend money and to regulate the amount of money coming to the region and spending there. So the national level is not, the local level is not the right place where to have some strategical decision making that should help the national level generally. So the more complex reforms are really needed here. And of course, we have to deal with the budget and the final account of the national level and local level as well. And now there are some surveys. The first one is about the gross domestic product. As you can see, since 2008, the gross domestic product was decreasing a bit, and then it increased a little bit. So we can say that the economy was growing a little bit due to the economic reforms and savings. But we can see also slight inflation. That is the yellow column, and the gross domestic product is the red column, as you can see. And this is the public debt that is increasing a bit last year. And nowadays it's a bit decreasing the year 2013. And another quite interesting survey that can say that Chamber of Deputies doesn't have the confidence in the public. For example, 23% of people trust the Chamber of Deputies. And there's the second column, the second line, and the fourth line, that's ridiculously 17% people trust the government. And here there's the confidence of political parties in the Czech Republic. The blue line signs the confidence for the governing party, the Civic Democrats, who used to be in the government till last year. And the orange line is the main opposition party, the Social Democrats. Red line means Communist Party. And as you can see, the popularity and confidence to this party is increasing quite a lot from 25% to 30%. And top of line, that's also the governing party that was governing last week. And these are the most important parties. And now, there was a question in one survey. If people would like to have this kind of government system, or they would prefer to change and to have really strong government rule. And the answer is that 24% are more or less for strong government, but only 33% of people, they are quite satisfied with today's governing system, and they want to preserve this. So the final question is, if the government is governing in the way the people want, or if this kind of democracy is not legitimate today. So I would like to thank you, and if there are some questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. As I said, unfortunately we don't have time for questions, so now let's move from Croatia.
So how long do I have?
Let's say half an hour.
First of all, thanks.
Of course, still we need some time for the discussion during the lunch. So
Yeah. So thank you everybody that came with us to South Park yesterday. We're exceeding tomorrow, of course. That's what we were celebrating. I hope you all had a nice time. And I'm sure I can count on the members of the Croatian team to continue the party for days to come. Okay, this is the question that we're facing. Are we going to exit our crisis as Croatia by entering the European Union? Or are we going to enter a larger crisis within the European Union? And I'm going to answer that question with a strong spin towards institutions. This is something that very often lacks when you take a look at these projects, these reforms, things that we do. I want to take a look at the ways in which institutions that are pre-existing, very long term, that are slow to change, the ways in which these institutions constrict available policy options. And I'm going to offer, I hope, a short comparative structure in which we can place Croatia and see how some of these problems play out. And these, in my opinion, are the three biggest problems. The unemployment levels in Croatia, pretty large, slow to change. The sovereign debt crisis, not only in Croatia, of course, all three of these levels exist in almost all of our countries. And the trade deficits. So we'll be looking at the way particular institutional arrangements play together to create these frameworks, and also the way in which the euro influenced trade deficits in the Eurozone. And this might sound counterintuitive. Why would I want to talk about the euro if we're talking about Croatia? We don't know when we're going to enter the euro. But the idea is that Croatia had all of the negative effects that the euro periphery is experiencing now before the euro, because we pegged our currency to the Deutschmark in late 1993, and we kept this policy, which is hugely destructive, all through to now. So we might as well have the euro. Nothing bad for Croatia will come from the euro. Okay, so I'll try to convince you of all of these theses in, I hope, half an hour. So this is a slide that I guess we're going to have to just skim through. I was going to explain how these institutional frameworks work. What is the new institutionalism? I hope you're all familiar with this. With varieties of capitalism literature, with Paul and Soskis in 2001, and all dozens of books and hundreds of articles that stem from this project. The idea is, just the basic idea, is that there are positive externalia of any given particular institutional arrangement. That there are successful countries that combine these positive externalia with other positive externalia of other institutional arrangements into a functional institutional framework. And that there are two basic types of these functional arrangements: LME, liberal market economies, and CME, coordinated market economies. And the original 5 recognized institutional relationships are these 5. Just to point out the 2 most important for this presentation. It's corporate governance, so the way a firm will access finance. Say in Germany, this would be a stable arrangement where a big bank will combine several large firms around it, where all of these large firms would take part in stocks of each other. So this would be a stable long-term arrangement, not so volatile as in the LME countries where we have a strong dependency on stock markets. So hostile takeover maneuvers are possible and so on. And also industrial relations are important. This defines the way that unemployment rates would work in these locations. This is why I insist on industrial relations now. So the idea is that you can have a well-protected labor market, or you can have a liberalized, flexible labor market. And these give particular positive externalia in these functions. Okay, so this is the idea. This is from Holland English in 2004. You can have a well-profiled country on this end, and it would be successful. So these would be common law countries. This would be Canada. This would be Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, UK. And you could have a successful country that coordinates strategically. So this would be Germany and Austria and Netherlands and so on. And you can have countries that don't profile so well, who don't use positive externalia of these arrangements in a normal fashion. So these would be Mediterranean countries, basically. So how do we place Croatia in this? Because these are ideal types. I mean, let's be honest. This often doesn't work. When you put in actual data, you don't get something that's as clear-cut as this. This is the general idea of it. And when you try to isolate elements of it to produce a framework, you often get weird results. So this is Nelson Hollis. This is one of the best attempts to do this. And this was, the vertical axis just shows GDP per capita in the early 2000s. So it's not too important for us. For us, this is important. So market coordination versus strategic coordinations. And this is what I'm talking about. You will see that Greece is a bigger Germany than Germany, which obviously is not true. But when you take a look at this attempt, and it's an open question, it's a very open question, but you can see that Croatia and Slovenia are approximately aligned with Germany. And we do have, both Slovenia and Croatia, strong affinity towards German laws. A strong idea that this is the best practice. So, okay, when I tried to classify Slovenia and Croatia against the Baltic countries to see how this works, I took the Heritage Foundation Index. We put out like aggregate labor freedom indices and aggregate financial freedom indices for every given year. And you can see that in 2012, Croatia and Slovenia were close to Germany, that Estonia and Lithuania were close to the UK. And this was a bit of a surprise for me. Latvia did not conform. Latvia, in this group of countries, Latvia was the only one that did not use institutional arrangements, even moderate ones. And indeed, of these groups, in this group of countries, only Latvia needed avail of this crisis. So, okay, unemployment rate as promised. This is what these institutions produce. I've called, we have the laser pointer thing now. Okay, I've called this high spike in unemployment. I'm sorry, all of these are in Croatian because I thought I brought my Excel files with me, but then I didn't, so we were stuck with Croatian graphs. But you can see the blue lines always represent real GDP growth. This is 2005, this is 2011. And you can see the ways in which unemployment rates react to GDP contractions. And in LME countries, or LME kindred countries, you see a rapid spike in unemployment. So it doesn't matter what kind of policy initiatives you take. This is the relative heuristics. You see something that I've called a vertical S function. So that's this huge rise and a slow recovery. And you can see how Estonia is similar to the USA. And you can sort of see how Slovenia is similar to Germany, but the problem is, of course, nobody is Germany. Only Germany is Germany. Germany has a huge trade deficit. So if we wanted to see the role of institutions, you'll probably need to take this red line and skew it like this. And then you have something of an idea what an ideal CME institutional effect would be on unemployment. But you can see the idea. A huge contraction in Slovenian case, a very slow, very gradual increase in unemployment, because there is huge labor protection, because it's a problem to enact layoffs. You can't do it, and it doesn't pay out. Okay, this is Croatia. It looks a bit skewed because I've added more years, but you can see that it's also a relatively slow increase in unemployment, comparable to that of Slovenia, but not all of the values are the same, so it looks a bit higher. And you can see our past contraction in 1999. You can see approximately the same thing happening. So after it, a slow recovery, and after a contraction, a slow increase, a slow deterioration. This is the CME effect. But we also have a huge problem in Croatia called youth unemployment. And this is something that we're bringing into the EU. Sadly, it was 43% in population less than 25 years. And only Spain and Greece are EU members that have higher rates than this. And of course, there are numerous reforms intended to remedy this situation. It has an active employment policy from 2009. Till now, there are currently 33,500 users only in these 5 first months of 2013, and about 20,000 of these are new users. So what was going on? They're arranging education, they're arranging training, professional practice programs. The idea is that this will boost the CVs in all of these young people. So when the economy picks up, they have an easier time finding a job, even if there's no other big effect to them. Now there are taxes exemptions for employers employing persons without professional experience. There are numerous labor law modifications in the past 4 years. And the tendency in these is actually to continue liberalizing the labor market, but these are very small changes. This is a tendency. Yes, word greater flexibility, but not, I don't see anything that would be a big change in Croatia. And when you look at these aggregate indexes, you will also find that there are not too big changes in the past 4 or 5 years in Croatia. Also in 2012, we have a Bismarckian system, of course, of health security, which means that the employer has to pay a contribution to the health system in proportion to the salary. So it used to be 15% of the gross salary, now it's 20% of the gross salary, and the idea is this should increase marginal productivity for any given worker, so it should serve to reduce unemployment. And it should also increase the competitiveness of Croatian products, increase our exports, because this reduces labor costs. But we have a problem with our health system. The fund already had to be bailed out a few times in the past 20 years, so this is reducing the income. It's a trade-off. You help one side of your economy, you create problems on the other. Okay, so in Zagreb, there is an idea we should probably do something to induce employment on the regional, on the local levels. But these mostly stay on the national level in Croatia. Zagreb does have a nicely developed social services role. It's prompted some commentators to call Zagreb a local welfare state, but these were not really in response to the crisis. This is just the way things work in Croatia. Zagreb also had a long-standing program of small and medium enterprise financing. There were credit subventions. So in the past 12 years, all of these credits amounted to about 1% of Zagreb GDP in 2010. So these are not small programs. They don't amount to a huge aggregate effect, but you know, probably from the point of view of the SME, they are very productive. So the evaluation process for these credits show 43% increase of expected employment in those SMEs that were funded. So these are nice programs. Zagreb also funds programs for innovation encouragement. They're somewhat small, it's 90, or less than 1 million euro. But also these small incubator programs called Zagreb Development Agency. There was 60 high-tech small firms went through this. They created some 300 and something new products that were developed in the infrastructure with the funding of this incubator. The only program that was really a response to the crisis was this intervention funds program that gave 2.6 million euro to 400 entrepreneurs in 2010. Okay, so this concludes basically the portion that deals with unemployment. We're going to look at fiscal policy now. How did Croatia respond fiscally to the crisis? This is also part of the varieties of capitalism literature. The idea is that CMEs, like Germany, like Austria, and I would argue like Croatia and Slovenia, should produce a strict fiscal policy in times of crisis, while LMEs, common law countries, produce sharp and active fiscal responses. Is this true? Can we see this from available data? It's a resounding yes. You might be surprised, but yes. When you take a look, don't worry, we won't go through everything of this data. Just take a look at averages. Public debt in LMEs grew by the average of 109%, factor of 2.09. And in CMEs it grew by 5%. Huge differences. And with the exception of Canada, all LME public debt levels, so this is public debt to GDP, grew by more than 52%, which was the rate of growth in the USA. I'm sorry, I didn't mention, this is from 2005 to 2011. The idea is that this should grasp the way that countries responded to the first contraction of 2009 and financial crisis that preceded. On the other hand, all CMEs had growth at less than 25.7%. This was the most active fiscal policy in CME countries. This was the Dutch fiscal policy. And you can see that the Croatian ratio grew at a comparable level, 23.8%. But I should mention that in the case of Croatia, this is an effect of a contraction in GDP. And also in this weird way that we restructure our shipbuilding industry. So we just took private debt and we made it public debt. And this ratio, when you take a look at actual structural deficit data, you can see that Croatia had an enormously destructive, very responsible, pro-cyclical fiscal policy. Not even Germany had as frugal a policy. So, okay, in Croatia, the ratio of public debt to GDP remains within 60%. We're projected to bust this in 2 years, though, but we're still within. And this mirrors a relatively good public debt position in most post-socialist countries, in Poland, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, exception, of course. But okay, let's take a look at deficits. Let's forget about these ratios because, like I said, in part these are distortions. Let's take a look at how budgets work, how these actual responses work. And here we have a vastly successful country called Poland, and we have a very unsuccessful country called Greece. Blue line is real GDP growth, so corrected for inflation, and the red line is a structural deficit. This is a deficit or balance in budget that's being corrected for the effects of the business cycle. So it's corrected for these distortions that come from the fact that you use GDP to measure public debt, even as GDP changes all the time. So GDP contracts as it did in Croatia, and all of a sudden it seems that your public debt grew because it's reported in relation to GDP. So here we miss out on this distortion. And you see two actually, in the idea, similar responses. What happens? GDP slows down or contracts. And the country borrows more, so the deficit grows. It's a necessary, even if you're not a Keynesian state, even if you don't want to encourage the aggregate demand, so you're going to do it via government spending, the idea is that when GDP contracts, you lose all of these transactions that you usually tax. You use all of this taxation that usually funds your revenue, so you have to make up for it by borrowing more, just to keep the same amount of spending that you did before. So this is a normal reaction. You see an excessive reaction in Greece with a deficit of 20%. This is not 20% of revenue. This is 20% of the potential GDP. This is a huge deficit. So they obviously overdid it. I mean, we can all agree here. But the idea is the same. You can see GDP follows structural deficits grow. This is Germany, the first one. Here you can see how a CME country, a successful CME country, copes with the crisis fiscal. GDP contracts, Germany doesn't even blink. It doesn't. It remains responsive. Here you see Ireland, so an LME country. Contraction in GDP, massive growth in deficits, more than 10% of potential GDP. And here you see Croatia, like I said, even more responsible than Germany. We have Croatia's first graph. We have a contraction in GDP, and our structural deficits actually improve. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's no wonder that Croatia had such a consistent crisis. One of the few countries that never made it into the plus. This is real GDP growth. So in 2011, we almost broke even. There was like 0.03% negative growth. I personally, as a Croatian, would find it much more comforting if it was a positive growth of 0.03%, but it wasn't. So every year until now, since 2009, Croatian GDP has been lower, smaller than the previous year. We never even started any real recovery. And yet, our deficits remain unperturbed. And you can see Slovenian deficits, also CME structure. So in an LME, you would see a spike like this, and structural deficit would go like this. And in the CME countries, just have a gradual, slow increase, or in the case of Croatia, just spending around -3%. Okay. So this is another relevant country, this is the UK. You see the idea. Said everything already, a contraction and a sharp reaction to structural deficits. So, okay, given this restriction in Croatia, this strong institutional restriction, there were a number of programs that served to either decrease expenditure or increase revenue. The VAT, the general VAT rates rose, wages in the public sector were reduced, severely reduced funding of many projects, including scientific projects, including junior research positions. So you've seen variants of this in all of these presentations. So how did it work? Usually when you see a graph like this is expenditure and revenue in Croatia measured as a percentage of GDP. And usually, when you see expenditures grow like this, it's explained with, well, there were more social services users, we needed more funding, so obviously expenditures grew. Well, they didn't. And you saw that in the previous graph. What happened was that the GDP contracted by 7%. And so when you measure it against GDP, you get something that looks like an irresponsible government responding to the crisis with an increased expenditure. It did not. It did not. That's very crucial. Okay. So here's a logical problem. How do you increase revenue without constricting the revenue in the private sector? You can raise taxes, but then you just kill your private sector. You kill your households, disposable income, you kill profit rates in all of these private firms. So the idea was, and this was also a tendency in Croatian projects and reforms, let's stimulate investments. So let's tap into savings, or let's make the projects more profitable. So reinvestments of profit became grounds for exemption from corporate income tax. The smallest SMEs were exempt from paying the VAT as long as their yearly income was reasonably small. And this is what happened. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is investment in Croatia, measured by the GDP. You see smaller downfall, but still it's never begins real recovery. And this takes us to element number 3. The effect of the euro, or in the case of Croatia, the effect of the strong kuna exchange rate. And this shows current accounts as reported by the IMF. Almost all the data in this presentation are from the IMF. And you see, okay, several years. In 1998, the two groups of countries, by the way, that I'm comparing is Gypsy group, right? The pejorative term for Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Ireland, and the Eurozone center, which I've tentatively defined as those countries within the Eurozone that had less than 8.5% unemployment in 2012, and these are Germany, Austria, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Belgium, and Finland. So you see the way that Euro intervened in their trade deficits or trade suffixes. In 1998, all of these groups, all these countries basically broke even. Then there was a 50% plus minus fluctuation until 2002, and you see slowly the Euro center trade balance improved, mostly of course through Germany, but also through all of these other countries. And you see in what was now to become Euro periphery, in these countries you see their trade balances drop, deteriorate. So this is both balances of goods and services. And then just before the crisis, in 2007, you see a huge difference. And the marvelous thing is these are symmetrical. Of course they are. When you introduce the euro, you lose a very important mechanism that stabilizes in a textbook model. When you have two countries with two currencies, there are automatic stabilizers at work if they are fluctuating freely. And you lose that with the euro. And this becomes possible. The 7.68% positive trade balance in the Eurozone as measured by percentage of joint GDP of all of these countries. So this is a huge, huge plus. And this is a huge, huge minus. Although if we added numbers for 2012, we would see that they are also slowly converging. Because of course, on the euro periphery, there's a lot of cuts. GDP is not behaving very nicely at this point. There are natural things that work. But structurally, this is what it looks like. This is the effect of the euro. And if you look at new euro members, so these are Estonia, Slovakia, number 2, the red line is Slovenia, number 3, the green line, you see the effects of their entry into the ERM2 mechanism. For Estonia and Slovenia, this was mid-2004. You can see their current accounts balances drop almost immediately. Very consistent. And in Slovakia, you actually see this trend even before they enter the ERM2, but it cannot really be stable for anything else. And you see, of course, current accounts improving due to the crisis. Okay, So what mechanism was at work in those countries that didn't have the euro? These are the 10 EU non-euro members plus Croatia. Data on this slide is from Eurostat, and I've marked with yellow those countries that devaluated or allowed their currency to devaluate in 2009 by more than 10%. And when you punch in these figures together with the figures from GDP contractions in 2009, you get a disturbingly nice regression. Here it is. You can see the successful Poland on the top right side. Poland devaluated by more than 20% against the euro, and it is the only country that didn't go into an actual contraction. And over here you see two outliers, Lithuania and Latvia. But even if we didn't have them, you would see that there is a strong tendency that this is one of the few elements that determine GDP growth during recessions. This dot, I can't point it, but this dot over here, right above my finger, is Croatia. So we're acting as if, almost as if, we were already in the ERM2 mechanism. And this isn't just 2009, this is from late 1993. That's what I'm saying. So I think it will be good for Croatia to enter the European Union. There won't be any negative surprises like Slovenia had. You have a normal exchange rate policy and then all of a sudden it's the euro. Your current accounts drop. No, Croatian current accounts dropped through the 90s and they stood a horrible, horrible situation. Although tourism, of course, offsets it. Tourism is perhaps even as much as 20% of our GDP. And our current accounts still stay negative. So large is the trade balance deficit in Croatia. So, okay, that's what I'm telling you about in late 1993. We had a currency stabilization program. It was the war, our economy was out of control, we needed to stabilize. And then after the war, we needed to get a macro framework that was stable and conducive to investments. And then in 2009, we actually couldn't do anything. Why? Because of the eurization of credits. There was more than 70% credits in Croatia by the private sector, so households and private firms, that was pegged to the euro. So if you devaluate kuna to euro, all of these people lose either disposable income or profit rates, because the rates they have to pay on their credits rise proportionally. So in 2009 we couldn't do anything. This was a structural, long-term problem for us. Okay, so to summarize, I hope I managed to convince you that for Croatia, it's not so much a problem of what the right policy decision to make during the crisis is. It was a problem of long-term institutional arrangements. And I will argue that it is the same for each one of your countries. That this is something to focus on. So we have a CME-type aggregate demand management regime, which means pro-cyclical fiscal policy. We have unemployment that's large due to the negative trade balances, but moves both positively and negatively slowly in reactions to economic environment. And there have been a few worthwhile programs, but basically they pale in comparison with everything the same. Okay, thank you.
Have any questions? Okay. So, this will be the last presentation, and afterwards we'll have lunch.
difficult political system, rather complicated. It's a kingdom, and it has evolved through several rounds of state reforms from unitary to federal state. Well, we have then communities, 3 communities and 3 regions. These legal and constitutional agreements aim at solving, in fact, the community tensions and to resolving the demands of autonomy coming from the Dutch-speaking Flanders and French-speaking Wallonia. So we have the power to make decisions is no longer exclusively reserved to the federal government and federal parliament. We have the leadership of the country, which is now in hands of communities and regions, which independently exert their authority within their domain. We have the communities, so there are 3 communities in Belgium: Flemish, French, and German community. The redistribution of power on the community level occurred along 2 principles. We have the language and the culture. So as a result, communities in Belgium have powers in culture, education, use of language, and scientific research. Then we have regions. We have Flanders, Wallonia, and Brussels. The second principle of state reform is related to the economic interest. So regions aspire mainly to more economic autonomy, and they have powers related to economy, employment, agriculture, and so on and so on. We have a few examples over there. And we have finally the federal level, federal state. It retains, however, important powers, for example, foreign affairs, obviously foreign affairs, justice, finance, defense, social security, and so on and so forth. Well, so in our presentation, we aim at explaining that the different levels of power, regional, national, and European, implemented various policies limited to the extent of the areas of competences in response to economic crisis. We have the Treaty on Stability, Coordination, and Governance, which was adopted at European level, which stressed the necessity of balanced budget and reducing state deficit and debt. We have the national level, which adopted some reforms, and finally we have the regional level with the Marshall Plan Marshall, so it's the same as the Marshall Plan, which adopted some reforms. That basically our hypothesis is to say that reforms on EU level, in fact, accelerated state reforms in Belgium, which my colleagues will present you a little later. So, as I said, our first level reforms will be at the European level. In order to better understand the general framework of reforms on European and national level, I'll start with the presentation of a major and latest reform on the EU level. It was a multidimensional response to the economic and financial crisis. And so I will consider the Treaty on Stability, Coordination, and Governance, and in particular its third chapter, which is the Fiscal Compact. So we have the background of the creation of the European Monetary Union, which implies, on the one hand, monetary policies for member states, and on the other hand, fiscal policies which remain national competence. As long as national fiscal policies affect other countries, we have a spillover effect. That stronger coordination on EU level is needed. Well, recent financial and economic crisis have led to considerable deterioration of fiscal situation in the Eurozone area, as you all know. And in terms of both the budget deficit and rising government debt. As a consequence, safeguards regarding the sustainability of public finance and the return to economic and financial stability has become the main objective, the main goal. Then we have the purpose of the Treaty of Stability, Coordination, and Governance, which is in fact can be summed up in three points. First of all, strengthening the governance of the euro area in light of the crisis, strengthening the firewalls against contagion and spreading the debt crisis. And third of all, set up national commitments towards fiscal discipline. So, when you have the form of the treaty, it's just interesting to underline that this treaty is an international treaty signed between 25 member states, heads of states, member states, which aims at ensuring greater fiscal surveillance and economic coordination within the European Union. The option of an international treaty, in fact, allowed member states willing to go further with commitments to go beyond which was designed by the European treaties, to do so despite other countries wishing to remain outside the process. So we have the treaty appears as a demonstration of some member states willing to go further for closer economic union. Then we have on the budgetary side the fiscal compact, which presents on the one hand a tool for guiding member states towards medium and long-term fiscal sustainability, and on the other hand, we have the corrective mechanism, which is the excessive deficit procedure, which ensures a correction of gross policy errors. Then we have what are in fact the subject of the reform. We have the so-called golden rules. You have all heard about them. So we have the first of all balanced budget rule. We have the general government budget shall be balanced or in surplus, which means basically general budget deficit less than 3% of the GDP and the debt to GDP ratio below 60%. Then we have the automatic correction mechanism. If a member state deviates from the balanced budget rule, then we have an automatic correction mechanism which will be triggered. And the member state will then have to correct the deviation over a defined period of time. We have then the correction of deficit deviations. Euro area member states agree to support, in fact, Commission recommendations and proposals of the Council Act. Member state then is a subject of, if it is a subject of an excessive deficit procedure, we have to put in place a budgetary and economic partnership program submitted to the Commission and the Council. Then on the fourth place, we have the debt issuance coordination. Basically, member states need to present their debt issues plans to the European Commission for approval. They discuss and coordinate among themselves and with the EU institutions in advance major economic reforms in their own countries. And the European Commission looks for, in fact, the general idea is that the European Commission will look for convergent solutions through these reports. And the last one, embedded fiscal compact rules into domestic law, which is well, overall, we have controversial effects. We have some economists that are concerned, express concerns about the adverse effects of these strict rules about public expenditures. We have they highlight that writing a balanced budgetary requirements into the constitutions will be, in a way, a very unsound policy that would have the adversely effects on the economy. Furthermore, there is from a political point of view, the fiscal compact faces a contradiction because, first of all, the fiscal policy is a matter of national sovereignty in the hands of democratically elected governments. More strict rules designed by European institutions would be viewed as an appropriation, in fact, a law which is not yet conferred to the European institutions. What's more, inscription of these rules in national constitution raises the question of the democratic deficit in economic governance. And finally, on the other hand, we have the matter of fiscal policy, in fact, is a matter of common interest because all Eurozone countries have an interest in preventing fiscal indiscipline, deficit bias and debt default within the monetary union could result in fact in painful spillover effects. So at the same time, we have the necessity to coordinate and to maintain in fact the price stability in the euro area. And in fact, through this coordination, the most important priority, which is price stability, could be easily achievable through numerical rules. Then we have the next level, which is the national level, and it will be my colleague Maxime present.
So we have to talk about the revision of the way how we finance our region and community. Why this reform? Two reasons. In one hand, it was necessary to clarify the mechanism of financing the new competencies of community and regions, and in the other hand, we've got different applications from different political parties on the both sides of the linguistic border. Just before the reform, the legislation was based on a fundamental principle, quite easy to understand. Since the start of the federal state in Belgium, Belgium consists of regions and communities which together form the structure of federal states. The transition from a unitary state to a federal state caused the division of power between the federal level and the federated entities. The special finance law defines precisely how the region and the communities can support the exercises of the new competencies. There were two possible sources of income for the federal entities, or decentralization of tax collection when such a regional authority directly imposes its taxes, or state or the community receive directly from the federal level a sum of money to finance the exercises of its jurisdictions. Since the reform, an agreement on a new government reform has been finalized. It provides a significant transfer of power from the federal to the region and communities. It was about 17 billion of euros. What kind of competencies? What kind of this is employment, this is health, this is family allocation, this is justice, a part of justice, everything about the people. This is also the tax autonomy. What are the principles who guide the negotiation for region? Increase is really the purpose to increase fiscal autonomy without reducing the fiscal prerogative of the federal government, and to have a greater accountability in connection with tax revenue. For the community, it's to have a solidarity mechanism for finance arrangement allocating resources on the basis of the objective criteria like case population. The negotiation led to a reform of financing system of the federated entities whose terms are being discussed in the context of the institutional groups who's called Comory. The fiscal autonomy of the region in terms of personal income tax, the new power transfer to a region, a new solidarity mechanism between region and communities, and also a compensation mechanism for transition between the two models. Why a new reform? Firstly, the institutional evolution of Belgium, and also the debt crisis has accelerated the negotiation. Why? Because I'm sure that you know that wait about 500 days for having a new government. The main actor, the revision of the law was in the perspective of the autonomy on the part of Flanders, Wallonia and Brussels. In addition, there is a willingness to respond to socio-economic and environmental challenges. Generally, financing reform of the federal entity is based on for region fiscal autonomy without reducing power of the federal government, and for community funding arrangement allocating resources to the population. For the difficulties to reform the Special Finance Act, special wishes exist on the both sides of the linguistic border, which often went in different directions. On the Francophone request, there was a desire to refinance Brussels, moreover to refinancing the mechanism community adopted in 2001 is breaking the financing of education. Indeed, the application of tax code to allocate a new funding creates a divergence in favor of Flanders and to the detriment of the French community. The Flemish claims its different objective, and it's firstly to increase the fiscal autonomy of the region, including primarily increase accountability of the federal entity and reconciliation skills and regional preferences. In Flanders, there is also the desire to correct some anomaly mechanism of national solidarity. What about the European crisis? The crisis has accelerated, if I can use this term, the negotiation about the finance law. Also, during this negotiation, federal government didn't have to take some austerity measure. Indeed, since 1 year, the government decided to take this kind of measure, like unemployment, modification of unemployment allocation, or maybe in few days an increase of the taxes, and also like and also that. So
let's take a look at the regional level. So we chose to focus on Romania because most of our group come from there, the Belgian ones. So we can say that Wallonia resisted quite well to the economic crisis. I think we can say that the system of social organization worked quite well and helped people to have a connection with the labor market and to maintain a certain level of consumption. However, we have big unemployment issues in Belgium. Especially in Wallonia, because the unemployment rate is 13%, so it's more than twice compared to Flanders. Brussels is way more. In terms of GDP, Wallonia also lags a bit behind, but it's still higher than the European average. Unfortunately, we have no numbers here. Actually, Wallonia used to be leading the development economy, but now it's over. It stopped in the 60s. However, we resisted quite well to the economic crisis, as I was saying, thanks mainly to a flexible labor market, but also we implemented a set of policies. We call it the Marshall Plan. It doesn't have anything to do with the war or the post-war Marshall Plan. It's just that we needed a symbolic name to the plan which was supposed to reconstruct our economy. So it contains the transformation of economy. So here we decided to focus mainly on the employment policies from in the plan. So this plan is consists in 2.75 billion euros in 5 years, which is huge considering that Bologna is only 3.5 million people. We can see that there are 6 priorities areas. The human capital, which means that we're reforming towards greater coordination between education, training, employment, and economic policies. Competitiveness clusters. Our colleague from Romania were talking about the IT sector. We're trying to do the same in Romania, having some clusters with some special taxation and stuff. We're using the scientific research as a way to pave the way for the future. So we're investing a lot in R&D, in innovation. We're setting up a framework conducive to the creation of activities and quality jobs. So we're implementing policies supporting entrepreneurial spirit, with particular attention to small and medium enterprises. We're also implementing policies that favor the internationalization of our companies. We're focusing on what we call the Employment Environment Alliance. That means that we think that the future will bring more and more green, will lead us to a greener economy. And we're investing a lot in the green sector, solar energy. So we're training people to be able to deal with that kind of issues in the future. And we're trying to combine employment and social well-being, mainly through policies that promote employment in the care industry. It's a bit early to assess the plan. We can say that a lot of jobs were created or are going to be created in the future. We count 18,000 direct aid companies and more than 200,000 trainees. For example, through language plan, it means that people receive money to go study abroad with focus on the national language, which is Dutch or German. And we also have more than 1,100 researchers. Now I think we can conclude and go have lunch. So yeah, we have seen that Belgium has been in a critical position since the beginning of the crisis. We have growing public debt, which is today 100% of the GDP, and increasing rate of unemployment, especially in Brussels and Bologna. But efforts have been put in place in order to improve the economic stability of the country. We've seen the European level, where we push toward more coordination regarding the budgetary system and the fiscal management of the member state, and all of this is monitored by European institutions. At the national level, we have seen that the crisis, the reform of the state implied new answer to the crisis, especially through the revision of the Special Finance Act, where more competences have been allocated to the federated entities. And at the regional level, we put an emphasis on youth strategies with the Marshall Plan to cope with economic and financial problems. But as I said, we will only be able to judge the effects in a few years, I guess. I hope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your contribution. I hope there will be some time during, maybe during the lunch or after the lunch in much more convenient, flexible atmosphere to comment on what you said and to ask some questions. After the lunch, you are supposed to split in 4 groups. So the group which is dealing with local level is supposed to go to room 104. 104. This is first floor. National level, the team focused on national level will work in room 116. as well be in the first floor. European level 114 and organizational team in 110. That's all. After lunch, 1:30, let's say. No. So then, at 2 p.m.